So how do we get the Bible to the rest of the world? I mentioned to you that God, even though He doesn't cause colonialization, He started to use some of these guys who became empire builders. Let's start with the Dutch Empire. You can see the green there. The Dutch are fairly important. Today, their country, I guess, is not as important economically, but the Dutch were very important a few hundred years ago. For our country, did you know that Australia used to be called New Holland? Holland is the Netherlands. They were powerful. You know why we have an island called Tasmania? Because of a Dutch explorer named Abel, a Christian name, Abel Tasman. He spotted it on a ship. He says, there it is, Tasmania. No, he didn't name it after himself. He named it after his sponsor, Van Diemen. Who's Van Diemen? Another Dutch guy. In fact, he was the governor of the Dutch East Indies. All right, you go look at all different places in the world. Many of our brothers and sisters from Indonesia are greatly influenced by the Dutch culture. Anybody heard of Cape Town? South Africa. Founded by the Dutch. Johannesburg. Dutch name. I used to live in New York. What was New York before? New Amsterdam. Brooklyn. Dutch name. So the Dutch once were very powerful. When they believed the Bible and when they carried the Bible to the world, they were very powerful. When they rejected the Bible, it all ended. You can trace this very easily, but again, like I said, most economists and historians will never look at this facet of human history. And so they don't really ever understand. When you read their theories, they're always confused. One person says it's this, and somebody else just as intelligent will say it's the opposite. You always have these arguments going on and on because they ignore the Christian or the spiritual aspect. So you got the Dutch Empire. What else? Next, you got the French Empire. I used to live in Quebec, so the Quebecois speak French. Many parts of Africa speak French. Vietnam and Cambodia was influenced by the French. And so, thank God, for a time, they took the Christian faith to these parts of the world. But when they stopped, when they had their humanistic revolution and they rejected God, then their empire ended. Then we have the Portuguese, all right? Tiny little country, Portugal, next to, on the Iberian Peninsula, next to Spain. But they populated Brazil, different parts of Africa like Angola. They even went to parts of India. And thank God today Brazil has major revival. The seeds of the gospel were sown, not by all colonialists, but some of those people were Christian. And some of them risked their lives to bring the gospel to places like Brazil. Then we have the Spanish Empire. Very large. In fact, Spain owned a lot of present-day America. It looks like they're probably going to own it again. There's a lot of Spanish immigrants in America. All the way from Mexico down to the very bottom of Argentina is all Spanish-speaking. There are parts of other countries. We've got Filipinos, influenced by Spain, right? In fact, the name, the Philippines, is named after a Spanish king. And we can thank God for the Spanish, not for everything they did, but thank God they brought the gospel. And so something like 90% of Filipinos say that they are Christian. But whether they're, truly Bible-reading, Bible-believing Christians or not, that's up to them, right? But the influence has been positive for them. Spain was the largest empire the world had ever seen until the English came along. And again, I'm going to trace it back to that one event where somebody risked their lives to bring the Bible into English language. And they've had the Bible for the longest, and coincidentally, people will say they also have the largest empire the world has ever known. In fact, there was a saying, the sun never sets. The sun never sets on the British Empire. Because look at what they own. And then we took out America because America fought for its independence in 1776. But you can kind of include America, Canada. Just tiny little nation, India, owns so much of Africa, India, some of the Middle East. We are here today in Australia. because of the British Empire. And we've got Malaysian friends, Singaporean friends, and you've been greatly influenced. And you've been blessed to be able to speak in the language of international commerce, English, because it wasn't the Chinese or the Japanese or the Indians who colonialized Malaysia and Singapore. It was the British, and gave you a good foundation in a lot of Christian biblical values. And that's really the reason that a tiny little island like Singapore is prospering today. There's no reason for that one little rock to prosper except it's had, comparatively, compared to the rest of Asia, it's had more of the gospel than most of the rest of Asia.